Welcome to the next edition of Grid Pulse. I'm Bryce Yonker with Grid Forward. Today we have with us Heather Rosentrader. Heather's coming from the utility Avista. Heather, thanks for being on.
Thanks. Yeah, it's great to be here. I appreciate it.
So Heather, I believe it was last year where you took the role as CEO there. I'll let you share if you want to divulge how long you've been at the organization, but tell us a little bit about your history and your background that led you to that post.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, it's just been over a year now since I've been in the CEO role and actually coming up this summer on 30 years at the company. So
Congratulations.
thank you. Yeah, some big milestones. And it has been really fun wrapping up this first year and reflecting on the last 30 years and all of the experiences we've had in the utility industry and helping especially some of our newer employees who feel like everything's changing so much. There's so much uncertainty. There's so many headwinds coming at us. How are we going to handle this? And I do think things are changing probably faster than I've ever seen them. However, throughout my 30 years, and I know from the stories I've heard previous, we've always had challenges and headwinds and even some probably bigger challenges than we're experiencing right now through my career. And so it's nice to have those experiences to kind of ground through these additional times of uncertainty and change and headwinds we're experiencing. So I do have a lot of appreciation for a long career, and a lot of different roles at the utility over that career have really helped me, I think, be prepared as well as you can be, for this kind of role.
Yeah, a lot of the technology leadership and operations leadership roles I know you've been involved with, and basically saw the predecessor to Grid Forward, start up about halfway into that, about 16, 15 years ago. So let's dive in on what some of the drivers are in your communities. I know you're sitting there in Eastern Washington, but you guys have some other utility operations. What are the drivers that you're seeing either at the state or local level, and how does that kind of direct the operations that Avista is looking to put in place?
Yeah, and our footprint is in Eastern Washington, Northern Idaho for electric, and then have gas customers in Eastern Washington, Northern Idaho, and in Oregon. And then we own the electric company in Juneau, Alaska as well. But I think the bigger issues that we're navigating are pretty common, I think, amongst, across the country, is that I've heard it called this trilemma of how do we continue to provide reliable energy and move in the direction of a clean energy future, which I think we all want. It's just how do we do it affordably, and can we do it affordably? And being able to, I've heard it described like a balloon too, is you push in one side and then it comes out another area. And so it's I think one of actually the most important societal challenges for us to navigate and help figure out. And we know affordability is a big focus, and it always has been and always will be, but it just seems like it's even elevated even more in terms of focus right now across the country from inflationary perspectives. And we truly have seen our risks that we manage on behalf of our customers. Some of them I don't think they're growing, and some of them I don't think are unique in terms of extreme weather conditions. I think that's seen across the country, but wildfire risk for sure for us is increasing. That risk is increasing, and so the costs to mitigate that risk on behalf of our customers are causing rate pressure as well. And then for a lot of us too, the increasing risk of managing cyber and physical security threats as well are things that we're focused on and are causing more pressure on affordability.
Only all those things, huh? I mean, there's no free lunch in the energy space, right? Everything comes with trade-offs. Everything comes with push and pull. I use the rope analogy often. Like if you pull one piece, you're putting tension on the other. On the grid modernization roadmap, what's at the top of the list for you all? And has that been evolving recently, or has it been more steady state from what you guys had put in place some time ago?
Yeah, we continue to evolve, and that's one of the fun things I've learned over my 30 years. Is I remember when I first started at the utility, I worked for our fuel cell subsidiary that we had, and I had this perception of the utility being over 100 years old. Haven't they figured everything out? What new and innovative could they possibly be doing after 100 years? And when I came over to the utility, it was this aha of, oh, technology continues to advance. And so the how we get things done we can continue to get better by leveraging that technology as it advances. And so even though we did, from a grid modernization perspective, start, I think, on the early end of it, because we had been testing some as communication systems were advancing, as metering systems were advancing on the distribution system, as automation equipment was advancing and maturing. We were doing pilots on the early side of that in the early 2006, 7, 8 timeframe. So when the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act grants came out, we were ready with the shovel-ready projects to take advantage of them. And we focused on, instead of smart metering, we focused on grid automation. And so we have had our grid automation system in place for 15 plus years because of that. But we're actually on our second iteration right now of an ADMS system, because our distribution automation system was separate from our outage management system. And so we're bringing those together right now. And so we're benefiting from technology as it's advanced. And we're continuing to expand the implementation, how many feeders we have on it. And what's been great is that the systems that we need to help reduce our wildfire risk are actually enabled through a lot of that automation that we put in early on, by having communication to most of our substations and by having remote operation of the relays and being able to increase their sensitivity automatically and remotely, which is helping us manage our wildfire risk. And so it's been cool to see this foundation that we built many years ago continue to add value in new ways that we didn't expect when we put it in.
To have the utility CEO talk about ADMS, OMS integration in our second question, I'm very tempted to ask how that's going. Maybe we'll come back. Maybe we'll come back to that. No offense meant, but Avista's not a big utility. I mean, you guys do have operations in 4 states, but I would say congratulations intended that you all are at the front edge of innovation. Why is innovation so important there at your, let's say, medium-sized utility?
We acknowledge we're on the smaller side, especially for investor-owned utilities. And so we do recognize that we have to punch above our weight. We have to be more innovative because we have some similar fixed costs that are spread across our customers compared to the larger utilities that have more customers to spread them across. And so we have to be even more innovative and focused on cost management and taking advantage of new advancing technology. Those are the kinds of things that we focus on intentionally, is how do we keep that innovation alive, because the type of business we're in just inherently is challenging to innovate, because the grid isn't a lab. It can't be a lab. It needs to be very reliable. And we know to innovate, you have to fail fast to learn fast. And we can't be failing on our grid. And so just by the nature of the type of work we do, it focuses more on quality and consistency and standardization, and is harder to learn fast, to do things different, to test things. And so that's why we've been so focused on creating a lab where we have our entire system, a simulation lab, so we can test things before we put them on the grid. And we focused on doing design thinking training and having this how might we kind of attitude. So instead of saying, well, we've tried that, it didn't work, or we've always done it this way, it's, well, we've got new tensions, we've got new technology to be able to solve those challenges in new ways. How might we? How might we take advantage of these things or do things differently? And so it's been very intentional activity, from creating an innovation station team that helps groups and individuals who have new ideas be able to figure out how to explore those and look at, is there new IP that we should create based on this idea? Is there a new equipment? Should we partner with someone to advance this? Is there just a new process that we want to operationalize to support everyday innovation? And so, again, we've brought in that design thinking to help us support those kind of ideas. We've thrown pitch jams where we have our employees teeing up ideas and the audience is voting on the best ideas. One of those ideas was substation as art, and how could we have our substations, although we as utility individuals love our substations and think they're beautiful, the average community member may not. And so, but yet they're in our communities. And so we actually, in one of our new substations in our downtown area, we got local artists to help create art for those substations. And it's really additive to the neighborhood instead of taking away from the beauty of the neighborhood. So just examples like that that are pretty unique that I think come up through the intentional environment and systems and expectations that we put in place.
I would say that most utilities, if they have an innovation focus, they box it pretty specifically. This is our innovation team, and we kind of only do innovation here. But it seems much more dispersed there. I'm sure that's been intentional. But how do you all bring it across into the organization? Tell us a little bit about how it works. Obviously, you guys do external partnerships, and you even spun off more companies than I can probably remember, which is pretty unique in the industry. So.
Yeah, and I learned early on because I did start here at one of those companies that was a subsidiary, a fuel cell subsidiary that ultimately Plug Power purchased several years ago. And so that was my kind of expectation, is that's the kind of company we are. Because I think when we experienced the energy crisis, it did pull us back to say, I think a lot of utilities said back to basics. We're just going to, because they were trying to be a communications company or a fiber company, and that, when the energy crisis hit, caused a lot of challenges. And so I think a lot of utilities, again, back to basics. And I joke that it was kind of like, well, don't even think about innovation. Like, we are just doing pipes and wires and focused on that. And so for me, since I started before the energy crisis, I experienced that really hyper innovative culture. And then I saw us move to the back to basics. And when we got financially healthy again, I was able to say, okay, are there baby steps we can take to kind of bring that back? Because it is truly important from how we operate and as efficiently as possible, and from a even culture and employee empowerment perspective, to be intentional about supporting that kind of culture. And so that is when I recognize, okay, it can't be just a team, a couple golden, selected people that get to do the innovation, and then they throw it over the wall to the engineers that have a pile of designs that they have to do, and then that innovation project goes to the bottom of that pile if it's done that way. And that's what I experienced. And so I recognize, okay, we need to have this be embedded in intentionally into how we're doing our work, so that when after we've tested it and tried it out and piloted it or demonstrated it, that we can actually operationalize it. And I do think that operationalizing of the innovation is probably the hardest step along the way to getting the value out of it, for a lot of different reasons. And so understanding that is going to be one of the more challenging steps, I think, is driving us to how do we bring more people into that innovation side, both because the ones that are doing the designs every day probably have the best understanding of where the tensions are, where the challenges are, how to solve them, and you support what you create. And so having them on the front end of doing things differently and evaluating it and designing it is going to help you get through that operationalizing step most effectively.
The utility industry, somewhat notoriously, has kind of an abysmal amount of R&D expenditures. I won't compare us to the other industries that we've often been compared to, but to say that the energy ecosystem is dynamic is very polite, right? Things are happening kind of all at once right now, and innovation can solve it. So is there an underinvestment in innovation? How is the the kind of pathway to show something works and not have it do death by pilot and see that it works commercially and then start implementing that at wider scales. How's, from your wider perspective in the industry, how are we doing right now?
I think that having regulators support and understand the importance of innovation and trying new things that aren't always going to work is a key to success. And fortunately, we've been lucky to have regulators who have been supportive and understanding of the need to innovate and the risks associated with it, though. So, for example, we had the largest vanadium flow battery that we installed down in Pullman over 10 years ago. And it was, again, it was large, it was new, it was technology that came out of Pacific Northwest National Labs. And we partnered with WSU and with other entities to get this installation and to learn from it, because we were just starting to move into larger neighborhood scale or moving towards utility scale batteries and needed to understand how to operate them, when you charge, when you discharge, what the losses were of that cycle. And so we installed it. Ultimately, it failed. The battery failed, as new technology does. And we did our very best internally we learned a lot while it was operating, and through that failure even learned a lot. And so from my perspective, it was a success, even though the battery itself, the technology failed, it was a success for what we needed from it in terms of that learning. And so we've continued to add new battery projects and benefited from that learning we got from that first battery project. We've taken and done better with the future batteries that we've installed. And it was a question, I think, whether we were going to get recovery of it because it failed before the life of the battery ideally would have been. And our regulators ultimately gave us that recovery. And I think that was a really important statement to continue to encourage us to innovate and try those new things.
Tired of costly grid upgrades and unpredictable demand? Virtual Peaker's AI-powered virtual power plant software empowers utilities to maximize the value of distributed energy resources. The cutting-edge platform optimizes DER operations, enhances grid stability, and unlocks new revenue streams. Learn more at virtual-peaker.com. Now back to our episode.
Let's talk about resilience, and you mentioned wildfires in particular. Mm-hmm. So pretty much every utility in the West is somewhat of an existential threat, and they've gotten very real, including in some of the communities there that Avista serves. Very real, very scary. How are you all dealing with the wildfire threats? What are some of the maybe interesting, unique, or different solutions that you guys are kind of putting into place to head it off?
Mm-hmm. We've had a formal plan for 6+ years and have specific focus areas, of course, vegetation management and grid hardening / grid modernization, situational awareness, operational and emergency response, and are partnering with a lot of different entities. I think some of the more unique programs are partnering with our volunteer firefighters departments and other fire responders so that we, in those high fire risk times, they're actually part of, when we see an outage, they're part of our first calls to first responders. Is we're not waiting for one of our employees to go visually see where the outage is, and maybe you see that a fire has started. We're sending the fire responders at the same time. And so we're just continuing to work with our partners in the area to figure out how can we all work together to better reduce the ignition starts. And then if you do have those ignition starts, how do you respond to them as quickly as possible, from The cameras have been some of the newer things that we put in, and we're partnering again with the other at the state level, at the regional level to utilize those. And we have found that those cameras just this last wildfire season enabled us to respond more quickly to some fire starts in the region, even ones specifically that our infrastructure wasn't involved in. And so those partnerships have been really helpful.
If you want to talk about synergies on OMS and ADMS, by all means, but if you want to take this in a different direction, feel welcome. Are we getting the data that we need to run the grid better? People always ask, like, how much do we know about the grid? And right now we still don't know enough, although I know you guys are maybe on the front edge of how much situational awareness and grid visibility you have. But from a data analytics standpoint, are you guys able to make actionable decisions that are informed by the right information, or do you think that journey still has a ways to go?
I think we've come a long way, and even some of the work that we've done in terms of our situational awareness and our systems that we are utilizing specifically around wildfire risk and understanding as that risk increases, how we operate our feeders differently. We have a lot more information both with our grid metering and also weather stations and things like that to fold in. And we've been able to see with those advanced systems that help us actually forecast our storm outages as well better, which has been, I've really appreciated, so that when we do have forecasted high winds, we had a big storm in March here, which was pretty rare. I don't remember having significant winds, significant outages in the March timeframe in really all of my career. But as we saw these forecasts of high winds, we were able to model that in our system and have some forecast around how many outages we might see on the system. And that's something, again, that we've just enabled through these new systems in the last couple of years. And so then we're able to plan better, of course. We're able to bring in more contract crews, potentially request more mutual aid, make sure that we have the right material and pause other work that's going on. And you're right sizing, I guess, your preparedness, because you don't want to pause a bunch of planned work and then have nothing happen and then you didn't get that work done. And so you don't want to call in a bunch of mutual aid and have them sitting around either, going back to affordability. And so we want to be able to right size our preparedness for some of these storm events. And I do feel like both the systems and the data that we've improved upon over the years have brought us to a pretty exciting place.
One more question, then I think I want to go to a rapid fire format with you, so I'll give you a warning on that. Obviously, your customers want you to deliver affordable, reliable power, but is that relationship that you all have with energy customers evolving? Do they expect something different out of Avista and what you guys are doing in providing the power for their lives and businesses?
I think they are looking for a value proposition of, as our prices go up, what are they getting for it? And so we're looking at that resiliency and that reliability differently in terms of, we are seeing, again, more severe weather. We're seeing the wildfire risk that is causing risk related to public safety power shutoffs. And so we've focused on creating resiliency hubs, working with some more of those rural areas, but also our local areas to Spokane to find community centers and install battery backup and natural gas backup and solar, and work with their building management system to have those be resiliency centers. So those assets on an everyday basis, when they're connected to the grid, are adding value through price arbitrage and other ways, but then they're ready for, if we do have a storm, if we do have a public safety power shutoff, that they can be resilient and be a community place for our customers to go. So we are thinking about those kind of resources differently than we have in the past. And I think that's what our customers are expecting based on the changing experiences related to, again, extreme weather and wildfire risk.
All right. So this is going to be a little bit of a rapid fire on kind of really your leadership style. So really just what comes naturally and quick. You don't need to elaborate too much on it. So I'm just going to ask you a few questions here. What are you most proud of?
I think that supporting that innovation culture, and when I hear people, when they're experiencing a challenge, bring up the how might we, that's how they led their team through a challenge. And I feel pretty proud that I've helped support bringing that culture back strong at the company.
How do you inspire the team or the whole organization in your instance?
My big focus over the last few years has been talking about us as one team. And through some of my experiences, and I think this is natural at any company, you have, when something goes wrong, sometimes you have pointing fingers. It was, they could have done something different. And that to me always felt so counterproductive, because every one of our roles is important and needed to be able to serve our customers well. And when there is a challenge that comes, if we can have a respect and appreciation for those unique skills that each one of our roles brings, and just focus on how do we come together to solve those problems. And then when we do have things to celebrate, successes, to have that collective, we were all part of that as well. I think I've seen a lot of great progress, I guess, in that area that has helped bring us together.
Who do you lean on to support you?
Oh, I do connect with some of my predecessors. I brought actually 3 of the previous CEOs together for a lunch a few months ago, and it was fun to just hear some of their experiences, their successes, their challenges, and it helped put things in perspective for me. And so I've enjoyed that and appreciated that support.
You're not leaving or changing anytime soon, or not making any announcements, but what do you want to be remembered for?
Oh, I do think culture at the company, and again, helping to support that innovative culture. I also hope in the community. I'm 5th generation here in Spokane, and so I'm very committed to supporting the success of the community. And so I hope I have a good, strong impact there as well.
And then the last one, how do you calculate success?
For me, I learned long ago, it's based on, did I do my best? I can't judge my success on how other people view it, because I'm never going to be able to make everyone happy. So yeah, did I do my best?
All right, we'll wrap up here. Thanks for the rapid fire. That was fun. Mm-hmm. And it's a little bit of a softball, but I'm interested on your thoughts for it. But how can electric utilities maintain a role as a trusted partners in the communities that they serve?
Yeah, I loved early on in my career, I was exposed to, we brought in a consultant to help us. Okay, what's the best thing we can do to grow the company? And the answer was you need a healthy community. Having a growing community is the best thing you can do to support growing utility. And I loved that connection and synergy, and helped really make it clear that us supporting economic development is going to help us, be a healthy utility as well. And I've also seen studies that show communities that have higher trust have better economic outcomes. And so building trust with the community to the success of the community and then the success of the utility. I just love that kind of synergy, I guess, between those 3 things. And we have a lot of opportunities to listen to our customers and engage with them and help educate and help learn from them as well. And I think that's a key part of trust, is you trust who you know. And so us being out in the community so that our customers know us and see us as humans, humanizing the company versus just having us be a big building here in Spokane, I think is really important. And so we do have several customer groups that we listen to. And then, I try to say yes every time I'm getting asked to do a presentation, come to a community group. If I can make it, I'm trying to make it, because I think that's one of the important pieces of building trust, is being out there, having that presence, listening, bringing that back to our team so we can always get better.
Heather Rosentrader from Avista, thanks for being on with us and all the great work there.
Thank you.
Thanks again to our season sponsor, Virtual Peaker. If you enjoy Grid Pulse, please follow us on your favorite podcast platform, give us a like or a review, and tell your colleagues. You can listen to all episodes and learn more about our efforts to advance the grid at gridforward.org.